Awesome. Well,
or
I'm
skiing.
still clicking admit left and right, so I know people are still coming in, but we're gonna go ahead and kick things off because we are 3 past, and we wanna make sure that we're getting the use of the full hour. So hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. If we have not met before, I'm Natalie. I head up marketing for Climate People. Climate People is a climate technology recruitment and advisory firm. Essentially, we operate like a traditional recruitment agency would, but only work with companies that are working on climate solutions. And of course, the other side of that is working with job seekers, many of like yourselves who want to get a job in this space. And Climate People is a really small team. We're a team of two. So we only have 10 or so jobs posted on our job board at any given time. And we really want to get more people working on climate than those people we are going to place directly. So that's where our events were born. And super excited to have Shannon here with us today to kickstart this three-part series that we're calling Purpose to Pay. So essentially, how can you take your career and really focus on impact and really get a purpose-driven career that also pays well and can be something that is your dream job. So today we're going to spend the next hour focusing on narrowing your focus, narrowing down the scope of your job search. Then in January, so 2 months from now, we're going to focus on standing out. So we all know that any job that is posted gets lots and lots of applicants. So how can you stand out from all those applicants and get to that top of the pile? And then finally in March, we're going to focus on interviewing best practices. We really intentionally spread these out between 2 months time so that you can take the lessons that Shannon's going to teach you today and really start implementing them so that when you come in March, you'll be ready to apply to those jobs. And then, I mean, in January, and then hopefully by March, we can be at that interview stage and can really implement some of those interview best practices. So, as I mentioned, this series is led by Shannon Houde. I got her last name right. We just had to practice that one. But Shannon is a career coach and executive coach, as well as recruiter who specializes in impact and climate careers. So, really perfect to deliver this session. She has more than 2 decades of mentoring, coaching, and training over 1,200 professionals, executives, and job seekers looking to make a difference. She recently published her first book, Good Work, How to Build a Career That Makes a Difference in the World. And she'll share more about that. But really excited to have you here with us, Shannon. Thank you so much for taking the time to deliver this value with all of us. So I will hand it over to you. And again, really, really appreciate you being here with us.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. Glad to be here. I love what you all do at Climate People and proud to be part of your network. And hello, everyone else, wherever you are in the world. I like how spread out everybody seems to be. It's a good idea to put that in the chat, just so we realize how big the movement is, right, across the globe. So yes, thanks for the introduction. I'll just kick off with a little bit of empathy because I've been in your shoes before. I also was a job changer, a career changer back in the day after my MBA. And I've also spent most of my career reinventing myself again and again because I've had what I call a portfolio career. So I've been an accountant, I've been a management consultant, I've been a corporate recruiter, and a conservationist, as well as an ecopreneur in Patagonia, Chile. So I've worked for brands like Adobe, Barclays, Deloitte, and the World Wildlife Fund. And yeah, 15 years ago, I realized that there really just weren't any resources for job seekers. A lot of the recruitment agencies are focused more on the company and making sure that they're getting the right people placed into those companies, but no one was really supporting the individual job seeker. So I took all of my years in sustainability and the impact space, combined that with my coaching and psychology background and my recruitment work, and built a now 17-step program that breaks down the career change process into tangible tools and templates so that it's really easy to implement. You're not left hanging with a lot of questions of, am I doing the right thing at the right time? And what's most important? And it also debunks a lot of the myths that I hear from job seekers. And we'll look at a few of those here today as well. So our workshop series here with Climate People is going to cover a few bits of what's in the course. So as Natalie said, today we're going to get focused, and then the next session we're going to do getting to the top of the application pile with a couple of my tricky tools that are really useful as you're applying, and then drill down on how do we do this in person or verbally in the interview process. And here's just a quick overview of my course. This is showing 14 steps. It is now actually 17. So I've built out another few steps around interviewing and salary negotiation. But where we are looking today is going to be here at the narrowing the net. And then in January, we're going to do the bee in the shoes. And then we're going to do a bit of our nailing the interview, which is step 14. Although that is now a two-step process because the interview stage is really very intense. So I wanted to give my people a lot of support in that process. So today we're going to cover a few different things that I think are really important in terms of your stage of trying to dream. What could this next big piece of your career look like? Where could you go next? And it's a really overwhelming time, but it's also really fun to dream and to think big about what could this look like and how can you meet your own purpose. So after looking at a few career change tips, we're going to cover tools in this step, the Impact Career Onion, which is just a reference tool, and then we're going to drill into a tangible homework tool called the Dream Job Targeting, and then open it up to Q&A. So feel free to pop your questions on into the chat as we go through the program, so that at the end of the slides, I can open it up to Q&A and we can call on you to be ready to unmute and ask your questions directly. And I often get asked, can you get a copy of the slides? So the quick answer to that is no, but I know that Natalie posts the recording on YouTube, and I'll also show you some ways to get discounts on having access to the full course. So hopefully that'll be enough. So starting off, I'm just curious as to why are we all so overwhelmed and scared and freaked out by making a career change? I find that it just brings out a lot of kind of uncomfortable emotions. So I thought just before we kick off, why don't you write down one word or one thing that you are the most scared of? What is the fear factor? What's holding you back from making this next move? What's blocking you? And if you're brave and feel like you're in a safe space, which you are, please feel free to pop it into the chat and share that with others, because it's often nice to see you're not alone in your own fears. I'll give you just a minute, write down a sentence, a word, whatever comes to mind as to what's holding you back, what's scaring you and blocking you now. And just let you pop them into the chat as we go. I can't really see the chat right now, so I'll let Natalie have a look.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wait.
so there's a lot of challenges that you're going to be facing in making a career change or job change or different times in your life. First of all, I think the hardest bit is that we all just want this to be really easy. We just want to be able to like hop on the web, go on the job boards, find a job that looks interesting, apply, get the interview, get the job. It's really not that difficult. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way in the market anymore. It's not quite that easy or simplified. Also, the market and the agenda are constantly evolving, as you all are all very aware of how fast this is all gaining traction and then losing traction and gaining traction again. So depending on our political commitments of our countries and local authorities, and our companies and NGOs. So we need to be able to stay ahead of what is the language that's changing, the semantics, the reporting lines, and then just keep resilience in this whole process. Because ultimately, as a practitioner, once you have that next job, you're going to need resilience anyway. So let's start practicing that resilience now as a job seeker. Also, it's not a linear path. There's really no straight line to your career plan at this point for any of us in this impact space because it's evolving so quickly still. So you might need to make an interim step, which we're going to look at in a minute. But it's really important that you stay open minded, that you want to dream about what this next thing could be, but at the same time, you might need to take a baby step, an interim step to get to that dream. It might not happen all at once. And keep in mind that you are unique. You are an individual, an authentic self. And that uniqueness and authenticity really needs to shine through when you go out into the market and make this career change, and how you're communicating your brand story to all the people that you're going to come in contact with. Also, we need to be flexible and creative. And it's really important that as you navigate and try to unpack for yourself what your path is going to be in the career change, that the more creative you can be about your networking and about your personal branding and your positioning, and even about how you're finding the roles in terms of maybe creating a job for yourself, the better off you're going to be. So again, we need innovators. We need people that are creative thinkers and system thinkers in the impact space. So start to use those skills for yourself in your job search. And I think most of us are probably making a career or job change at this point. So I thought I'd highlight a few key tips to kick us off. First of all, this is one of my favorite quotes. So don't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, but what problems do they want to solve? And this really changes the conversation from who do I want to work for to what do I need to learn to be able to do that? And one of the biggest myths I hear job seekers saying is that they may as well change everything all at once. Well, I've just said that it's probably likely you're going to need an interim step. So I'm going to walk you through, and we're going to unpack more of this later, a few of my career change tips. And the first one is change only one thing at a time. And so this means your sector, your issue area, your skill, or the role. You'll see this more in the tool that we're going to go through as well and in the onion. But this is really important. Don't try to change everything all at once. And you're going to possibly need that interim step so that you can change one or two things at a time as you're repositioning yourself for that dream job ultimately. And most importantly, I see this time and again, people undervaluing themselves as they go to the market and they say, oh, I'm willing to do a job, any job. I just want to break in. And, I don't mind if it's lower pay. I don't mind. But to be honest, this is really not going to help you because the recruiter, the hiring manager, is probably not going to call you back. And ultimately, you're going to end up in a downward spiral because you can't even get the junior jobs. And that's because, and this is going to then affect your confidence, right? And that's really because companies are concerned that you're going to jump ship too fast, you find something else that's more your level, or that you're overqualified and you'll be difficult to manage. There's lots of different reasons, but also that if you don't value yourself, how are you going to excel in your role? So don't fall into that trap of selling yourself short. Now we're going to do what I call peeling the impact career onion. And it's a tool to help you narrow down some of the key choices that you need to make so that you can get focused. But don't worry, hopefully we're not going to make you cry like an onion would, of course, but I just like the layer concept. So another one of my favorite quotes is, to the person who does not know where he wants to go, there is no favorable wind. And that, if you don't remember anything else from this whole workshop today, that's the one thing I want you to remember. That as soon as we know where we're going, what our focus area is, and we build a conviction for that, you will get the universe conspiring to make it happen. And I have many stories that back that up if you want the real stories behind that. Another myth is being flexible across like public sector, private sector, NGOs, academia even. It's going to help you get a job. So you're just going to cast that net wide. You're going to keep hearing me say the same theme. But we need to let go of the fear of focusing and narrowing our target, because pushing through this fear doesn't actually shut out opportunities, but rather opens up more relevant ones more quickly. And there's three reasons for that. The first one is that your LinkedIn profile really only gives you one chance. It gives you a chance to have one personal brand, meaning you can't really reinvent yourself for every job application. So you really have to have a focused personal brand profile in there that's going to work for most of your audiences. Secondly, you're going to have a clearer message when you're out networking about how that person can help you. We want to make it easy for them to be able to put us in touch with their contacts by being as specific as possible with what our ask is of them. Otherwise, they're going to feel overwhelmed and not able to really help you. It's going to be too broad if you just say, "Oh, I want a job in climate tech and I'm willing to do anything in, marketing." It's just not enough. They're going to need more information to know how to go through their own database in their head to know how to help you specifically connect with someone. And lastly, hiring managers want to see how what you really want is exactly what they're looking for, and that what you're selling matches their criteria. And again, if you have 10 different tracks or 10 different target areas, that's going to be a lot harder to convince your audience about. So here comes a different version of the onion. My impact onion has 5 layers. And the first one is choosing between global and local. So first, you need to decide if you want to be a player at the global level in multinationals or solving a global issue. Or do you want to be more grassroots at the local level, affecting change within your community in a smaller organization, perhaps? There are a lot of startup opportunities and smaller B Corps that may not be global yet and are having just as much impact. So I think a lot of us get hung up with wanting jobs that have the word global in them, but it doesn't really say you're going to have more of an impact. In fact, you can oftentimes have more of an impact in a smaller environment where you can wear many hats and be more connected with your stakeholders. So the next few slides, we're going to unpack these 3 layers: sector, function, and issues. So now we need to decide and take a closer look at our sector. So first, you need to decide, this is kind of what I call the sustainability or impact triangle, which is public sector, private sector, and NGO. So first, just write down on a piece of paper which of those you think you're going to be going for. And it's important to make a choice here because the language and style of applications are going to vary greatly between these. For instance, like private sector, they're going to want to talk about, let's say, business development. And an NGO is going to maybe call that corporate partnerships or fundraising, whereas the public sector might even call it more like grant giving. So you need to be able to have the language and the words that are going to resonate for that specific sector. So this is the first level of the sector. The next layer down, if you've picked private sector, you then need to decide, do I want to go in-house and work within a brand or a company as an in-house practitioner, or do I want to work in consulting? And then if you're going to go down the consulting track, which is really popular right now because they're hiring for a lot of the carbon accounting and a lot of the disclosure reporting that's being required out of Europe. So there's lots of jobs in this space right now, and not a bad place to start out your career because you get exposed to lots of different projects and sectors. But you will need to think, do I want to work for a big 4, one of the big branded ones, or do I want to work more at a boutique? Once you've made those choices, you also then need to say, well, what sector, what industry do I know best? And the way I look at industry or sector is think about what the New York Stock Exchange would call it. And that's the easiest way to get a list of, is it an industry or is it something else? So just think about which ones you already know that you've maybe had exposure to in your studies or in internships or volunteering or in any of your jobs to date, and think about the full value chain. So, what are all the sectors that were involved in that value chain? So, for instance, you might be working at a consumer goods company or no consumer goods, but actually you want to move into food. So, you would then think about what are some of those food brands that you also know well from your consumer goods experience. So, we're always looking for the links to help tell that transferable story in our personal brand messages. Okay, now once you've picked all those, we need to think about the job. So the job is based on the skill or the task, and this is what are you going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. So this is where the rubber meets the road because we're hiring you for your skills mostly, right? We want to know you can do the job. But in the hundreds of resumes I see every day as a recruiter, I find that job seekers are often mixing their skills with their values and their traits and their impact issues. So I want you to try to get those things separated out so that it's easier for the reader to quickly see what are your core skills. And I usually go with only four categories, four skill categories. And then what are your proof points that are going to be proving those skills? All right. Oops, this one's got a little funky in terms of the formatting. Sorry about that. But this is the last of our layers of our onion, which is probably the most important and most exciting for all of us, which is the impact issue. What are you trying to solve? What problem are you trying to work on? What do you want to put your stake in the ground around? Um, so this one is really important because oftentimes we'll say, oh, I just want to work in impact, or I just want to work in climate change, or I just want to work in sustainability. But we need to get as specific and focused as we can in how we are defining that for ourselves. So the more keywords you can come up with that underpin that maybe overarching issue area, the better. So an example is, let's say you want to work in renewable energy, but you really want to work in solar or you really want to work in wind or whatever. Um, you're going to want to have all of those keywords there, even though obviously solar and wind are renewable energy. You would be using all of that language in your personal branding and on LinkedIn so that you're searchable based on those as well. So sometimes people say, well, I'm not a subject matter expert in these areas yet, and that's okay. You can also put on a resume and just say committed to shaping scalable change around climate, energy, carbon solutions, whatever you want to say, right? So again, you could talk about your commitment rather than calling yourself a subject matter expert. But we do talk a lot about SMEs in this space, subject matter experts or expertise. So once you feel confident, I would go ahead and use that language. But until then, you can talk about being committed to shaping change in specific issue areas. So now we're going to look at a tool that I use in my course called the Dream Job Targeting Tool. And I think that, I'm not sure, Natalie was either going to send this around to you all in advance or in the follow-up email. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to walk you through it, but you will have access to the tool yourself as well. So basically, if we don't know who our target audience and market and sector is, then we can't really develop a compelling and relevant personal brand or really a positioning strategy for networking so that we beat out the other 200 plus people going for that same job. So like any good marketing plan, we need to segment first, and I call that getting focused to get results. The good news is that this is also your chance to dream. So we're going to dig deep inside ourselves and find out what makes us happy, what our bigger purpose is. And then we can go back out to the market and test our dream against reality and then adjust it as needed with maybe an interim step. So in this tool, it's a chance for you to map out all the criteria that's probably swirling around in your head all the time around what you'd really like to do next or what really is important to you. And this tool, the goal is just to narrow it all down and dump it onto a one-pager that becomes kind of your roadmap for what you're shopping for. What do you ideally want next? I'm going to give you a better view of this. So we're going to go through an example together. So down the left is the target criteria. So we looked at sector just a minute ago. We looked at industry, impact issues. This doesn't have the skills on it because that's a separate tool that I do, but this then goes into like office and other issues that are important to you, location, remote, vacation time, salary, anything at all that you know is mission critical for you. And then you can see in these narrow columns, I have an E or a D. The E is for essential and the D is for desired. So we're going to start with filling in the no column. And the no column is aspects of your previous career, your previous job or experience that you really don't want to do again. So I moved from accounting. I was a basic accountant and I moved into sustainability assurance. So assuring or doing internal audit of sustainability reports. So I had to change my language, even though my skill set was still relevant. But I didn't want to keep talking about accounting because that was going to lose my audience. So this is the kinds of things that you want to park in the no column. If you don't really want to do it again, don't tell me about it. As a recruiter, I don't want to have to weave through the noise to get to the main point. I want you to really feature what it is that you're wanting to get out of this job and that you're able to give me to meet that criteria that we have for the role. Now we're going to look at the yes column. And this is for anything that you've done in your career to date that's relevant to where you want to be going next. So this is the sweet spot. This is where all those juicy nuggets of things you've already done that you're like, yeah, I could keep doing that, or that's really transferable, or I could see how that translates. Park that in the yes column. And this is what we're really going to highlight and play up in your branding and your brand story. Even if you've only spent like 10% doing something in a previous role, but it's relevant to the new role you want, that's going to go to the top of the list of being important on your resume, for instance. And if it's something you've done a lot of, but you don't want to do it again, we're going to play that down and not tell that story in the obvious weighted way. We're going to weight our story based on what the new audience is going to want from us. And then in the please column, this is where you're aspiring to go. So you might not have any proven experience yet. It's more aspirational, but it's going to help you see that where you're wanting to develop into, what issue areas you want to learn more about, so that, again, when you're shopping for the next role, it's also offering you something to help you grow and develop. So let's do an example, starting with sector. So this person does not want to work anymore in NGOs or academia. They don't mind the corporate space. In fact, they're putting an essential next to it, so it's pretty important, but they're kind of curious about what is a social enterprise. Maybe they'll do that someday. They want to go in-house. So again, being an in-house practitioner within a brand or an organization, not a consultancy. They know they want to work in retail or apparel because they've done that in the past, but they definitely want to be in apparel or fashion. And perhaps in the future, they'd want to do some B2C kinds of a structure where they're working directly maybe with a consumer or a customer. They're not too interested in human rights and fair trade, which is actually quite interesting because in apparel and fashion, those might be quite important. So the fact that they don't want those is important for them to realize that they actually want to be more on the renewable energy supply chain side within apparel and fashion. Even though their background might be more on the social side, they're wanting to transition more into the environmental piece. And eventually be able to work also around the issues related to water. Then within the office, they're just looking at things that matter to them, the size, getting feedback, politics, FaceTime. This is all that stuff that gets you niggly when you've left a job. You're like, oh, that was horrible because I just really didn't like the politics, or that was great because I always got senior level buy-in and felt really supported. So we just want to feature that in here too, so that when you're interviewing, you're also interviewing them and you know what you're looking for and what's a non-negotiable for you as well. Same with salary, location, type of work, remote, hybrid, et cetera. Those are really important to realize and to know about. Although I do say with the hybrid remote thing, don't just write off an opportunity because it says it's one or the other or it's in post. Go ahead and let them fall in love with you and then see if you can negotiate around that. So if it's the right option for you as well. I did have a client recently. She just got an amazing job at Starbucks, and ultimately they wanted her to move to Seattle, and she just couldn't. And she thought she was going to be able to negotiate doing a bit of a hybrid or remote, and they just didn't want it. So she couldn't take the role. So in some ways, you can waste people's time, but at the same time, oftentimes I also hear the other way around. I recruited for someone in Philadelphia with a big company a few years back. She was based in Boston. She was the superstar, and I ended up being able to negotiate for her as the recruiter with the hiring manager to say, look, it's worth investing and letting her come down for a week, a month, and let her prove herself that she can do this remotely. And she's still there, been a superstar. So you never know; it can go either way, but it's worth staying a little open-minded. So homework, this is going to be your turn. We're not going to be able to actually really look at this together, but you're welcome to work with someone else that's on the call today through the tool. I always think having an accountability buddy is great. It helps keep momentum and gives you feedback. Like my group coaching program, we do that, and it's really powerful to have other perspectives. So you are going to get access to the tool, and you're going to try to complete it in as much detail as possible. And I would just keep a printed version of it on your desk and just keep adding to it, changing it, updating it. But it's going to be your kind of North Star of where you want to be going next. And then it's also going to support you as you go build out your personal branding, your LinkedIn, your resume, so that, again, that's all aligned with what you've put on this crucial first focusing tool. And then I also just want to remind you that it's okay to dream and that this is a dream stage, right? We start with the dreaming and then we go and we test it in the market. We go and see what is realistic. What does that interim step maybe need to look like? So don't be too hard on yourself at this early stage, but try to really narrow down as much as you can and then test it. And then you can re-narrow down again. So nothing is set in stone. And lastly, one of my favorite Confucius quotes: choose a job you love and you'll never work a day in life. And I couldn't agree more. I've been doing that myself for 15 years, chose to have a lifestyle business. There's always pros and cons working for yourself, but I've been able to really achieve my own purpose in the context of having a flexible schedule so I could also be a mom. So the average salary in terms of how long it's going to take you to find a job. I get asked this all the time. And the average time it takes for the average salary you want is linked. So for every $10,000 you want to earn, it takes about a month of a job search process. So if you want to earn 100,000, you're looking at a 10-month process. And most people think it's a 3-month process. If you're lucky, maybe, but I would be planning for a conservative number because it does take a lot longer than you think it will. So just so that you don't get frustrated and you can keep momentum and you can have a plan maybe for some side gigs or other ways to make ends meet meanwhile. All right, so I'm just going to give you a quick last review of what we've done. Well, today we did the dream job targeting, and next 2 months, and I'm already writing off December because it's already so busy with holidays. But in January, when we all come back and join us in the new year, we'll be doing our getting to the top of the application pile. And then, as I said, March, we'll be doing interview prep. So lots more to come. I would love to stay connected with each and every one of you and hear how you've progressed through the tool and if there's any other ways that I can support you in your journey. So here's a few special discounts and ways that we can stay connected. Firstly, I host a speaker series every 2 months with senior leadership, usually chief sustainability officers in the impact space and climate change leaders. I've got one coming up from Amazon that I'm very excited about. But the next one here that we're doing in December is Sophie Beckham, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at International Paper. So please sign up and join us. I think Natalie's going to put the links into the chat. Also, if you want to join me for my group coaching or my one-to-one coaching program, you are welcome to use our special discount code today, Climate People 24. that'll get you a 10% discount on either of those two programs. And all of this is pretty much spelled out on my website as well. Also, my book, if you want to get a 20% discount, you can go straight through the publisher, or you can also get it through Amazon. But this is a great tool just to dive into to get your head around some of the things we talked about today, but also the other steps that I mentioned that are in the course. It gives you a nice kind of entry level flavor to all of my programming. And of course, let's stay connected on social media. I post hot jobs and free tips and content pretty much every day on LinkedIn. So it'd be great to stay connected there. Also, I do a little bit on Instagram, but not as much as I probably should. YouTube, we've got some of our previous Impact Leaders Lab speakers, so you can go and learn a lot more there. Or always feel free to reach out via the website or my email. All right, so let's open it up to questions. Feel free to go ahead again and type them into the chat, and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. I think we've got about 20 minutes. So let's kick it off. I'll turn it back over to Natalie to manage this bit of it. And I
Yeah,
think I can see chat now myself. Good.
amazing. Thanks so much for that, Shannon. That was super helpful. Yeah, we do have a few questions that came in the chat, so I can go ahead and read those off. But then again, to anyone else in the audience, if you want to ask a question, feel free just to raise your hand. You can click the little three dots and then reactions. You can put your hand up. That way you can come off of mute and ask those questions directly. But while we wait for those to come in, I'll start with the ones that were in the chat. So Shannon Peter asks, what are skill categories versus skills themselves?
Great question. I talk about skill categories because I want them grouped down to four. So, for instance, I might talk about stakeholder engagement as a category, but then the skills might be developing partnerships, influencing through empathy, um, herding cats, getting people on board with a concept or a project. So the overarching category is kind of the umbrella, and then the skills might be the ways that you're going to achieve that category, or underpinning things and skills and keywords that might help you achieve that skill category. So the categories, you should have four at the most, in terms of the framework for your personal brand story of what you do best and what you love doing and what you want to do more of in the next role. But you might weave in some of those other skill words into how you describe how you do that stakeholder engagement, for instance. Great question.
Awesome. Elizabeth asks, do you recommend using the SDG language?
That's really good. Very timely. I was just talking to somebody the other day about, are the SDGs kind of dead? Have they kind of like died out? And it's funny, I have a soccer ball in my office of the SDGs, and I have this big flag. And I was thinking the other day, what do I do with these? Are they relevant anymore? And I still love the SDGs. I don't know. I feel like they've kind of died out a little bit. I think I would only, to answer your specific question, I would only use the language if your audience is using that language. So always be matching what you're, whoever you're applying to, I would be matching that, because I think some of the language in the SDGs is quite universal and easy to follow, and others is a little bit esoteric, and maybe you're going to lose your audience. So just always be working backwards from, how are they describing the issues that they're trying to address.
Yeah, great advice. Just in general, always speak in their language. Awesome. Julie says, do you have suggestions for 10 months of job searching and side jobs for your LinkedIn profile and resume? How do you fill that gap?
Let me see hers again. Say that one again. Where is that one?
So essentially, if you have a 10-month gap on your resume because you're job
Oh, if
searching,
you have
how
a
do you
gap.
recommend
Oh,
putting that on your
yeah.
LinkedIn and on your resume?
Yeah. First of all, do not worry if you have a gap. Nobody cares. I mean, we all get obsessed that recruiters are going to be looking at every month that we've ever worked in our whole lives. And to be really honest, we don't care unless you have no work experience at all. Then we're going to need to tell some sort of story about what you've done at university or whatever. But if you have a gap, don't feel like you have to fill it with like, I had babies, or I went on a trip around the world, or we don't have to tell every single month of our lives in our stories. If there's something relevant in those 10 months that you did, volunteering or speaking on a panel or something, I would include that as a one-off project, but I wouldn't get too worried about having a 10-month gap, especially now because there's so much movement in the market, so many people getting laid off here and there, moving jobs, becoming freelancers, starting new projects, doing contract work. Since COVID, everything's you know, a bit loosey goosey, kind of messy. So I think I really wouldn't worry about having the gap. One thing I do though to work around that, if you are uncomfortable with it, is I don't put months in LinkedIn or on the resume if you've got more than 5 to 6 years of experience. If you have under 5 years, you might want to put months so it shows like how long you really were in that role. But after that, you've got enough experience that you can just put the years to and from. And that also helps kind of hide a little bit the month gap if you've got some.
Yeah, that's great advice. Really like that. Awesome. Joyce says, what's the most common reason that you've seen people burn out during the job search process, and how do you overcome that?
Oh, yeah, that's great. I think I'm going to answer the overcome first. I think what helps you just not get burnt out, so to avoid it altogether, um, is to pace yourself. And what I mean by that is to make a week by week plan and a commitment to yourself of what you're going to be doing every week, every month, as if this is a project. So this is a 6-month project, and you're wanting to be in post, sitting in a new chair, in a new office or whatever, in a role in 6 months, you work backwards from that. How long is it going to take to negotiate that contract? How long is it going to take to get all the interviews in? And you work backwards from that all the way to where you're starting the process. And at that point, you need to think, okay, how many people do I need to be talking to every week? Or what's realistic, depending on what your lifestyle is, right? I always say, make a goal for yourself that's achievable. So, can you reach out to one person a day? All right, that's 5 people a week. Or can you reach out to 2 people a day? That's 10 people a week. That adds up quite nicely. If you think about a month, then you've already got 40 people you've put your tentacles out and networked with, right? But if you look at it as day by day, it's not that overwhelming. So it's breaking this whole process down to be baby steps that aren't overwhelming, but keeping that momentum because you've got the plan and you've broken it down by the week. Where people get really overwhelmed, I think, and burnt out is when they start doing things out of order. So most clients that come to me say, I got laid off my job. And so I went looking, went out onto the web and looked at job boards, and I've applied to 100 roles and it's not working. Why isn't it working? And so they're basically all the way on my step kind of 12, and they've skipped steps 1 through 12. And so doing it in an order that makes sense is also really important. And so this targeting piece that we did today is really your first step. And if you can keep yourself from jumping right onto job boards and thinking that that's going to solve your job search problem, you'll actually have a lot more resilience and momentum. Also, 80% of your job search time should be spent networking and 20% on job boards. So the people that get burnt out are the ones that are doing tons of applications and then they're not getting any feedback. They're not getting positive feedback from the market, and that's a downward spiral. And that's not the way we get jobs anymore. So you've got to really limit yourself in that plan that you map out. Make sure that of that week, you're doing 80% talking to people, picking up the phone, engaging somehow. And only 20% of that time you're actually doing live applications. Because we get trapped into thinking that we're making progress by doing applications and looking at job boards. but it's actually counterintuitive. It works the opposite way.
Yeah. Awesome. Lior asks, do you have any specific advice for people with plenty of experience that's not climate related? I feel like I have to better introduce and sell my skills. So he has software as a service that's just related in his case. So essentially, how
Mhm.
do you sell your skills and sell your experience if you don't have that direct climate experience?
Mhm. So in that way, it's like the issue is the gap, right? So the job could stay the same. You could make an interim step where you're still doing the similar role, using the same skills, but you're going to do it in the context of climate. So maybe you go do it for a climate tech company or a climate software company or something that's more that's climate related in terms of the context, but your role as an interim step might need to stay the same as what you've been doing in the past. And then once you get into that climate context for a year or two, you then will have more wiggle room to be able to then sell yourself into potentially a more climate role or to change your role within that organization.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great way of basically just describing transferable skills in a way that
Yeah.
limiting variables and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome.
Yeah, the skills are the most important part, right? Because that's can you do the job?
Yeah.
So that's really the most important element. So if you can keep the role the same and change the context, that's a really great way to break in and do an interim step.
Yeah, and then Leo are like trying to find those climate verticals that have software. So like energy technology, a lot of those are more software leaning as opposed to like food is typically not as software heavy. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, but definitely.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Looking at what are the software tech heavy organizations where they would need your skill set, but they're doing something that's in the climate area that you're passionate about. Exactly.
Yeah. Mina says, do you think it's currently generally a tough job market or companies in this space are regularly hiring, or do you think more opportunities may come in the new year?
I wish I had the magic wand or the crystal ball on this one. Yeah, we still have a lot of unknowns, don't we, with our new administration coming? But I think that those of us in this space that care about it, whether that's companies or governments or NGOs, we're all going to be pushing even harder for this. So I think you're going to see an uptick, even though there's going to be some government roles that are probably going to disappear. Unfortunately, I have a few clients now that are coming out of the US government, but I think generally we're not going to see a huge downshift. I think it'll probably stay pretty much the same as it's been, unless there's some major shift in funding movement and sources that would affect your specific space. So I would say, assume the best. I think this agenda is not going anywhere. We know that. And there will keep being people that are going to champion this, both companies and leaders.
Yeah, certainly. I'm dropping a quick link in the chat right now. In next month, we're hosting an event with MCJ on predictions for the job market with some experts who the climate job market specifically, who are kind of they don't have that magic ball as well, but they kind of are positioned to see that. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with.
Great. I might come to that one. Great.
Yeah, please do. You're always welcome. Amazing. Lindsay says, somewhat similar to Leor's question, I feel like I have a passion imposter syndrome. How do you tell a story that you're so passionate about climate and sustainability when you haven't been working in that space to date?
So you're telling your passion, your commitment story rather than that yeah. So you'd still probably need to have something tangible that shows your commitment. So have you done, volunteering? Are you doing research and writing about it on LinkedIn? Are you partnering with anyone on specific projects? You need something that shows you've got, maybe there's a certification that you've done, something that shows you're starting to get into that space. And then again, selling your skills rather than trying to sell that issue expertise in the context of something that has those issues at hand. So again, you're going to get exposure to those issues in the next role, but you're not going to pretend you can go in and really address them directly yourself out of the gate. However, you can again use language like committed to shaping scalable change or impact in, and then list one or two of those issue areas so that they see that's where you're heading, but you're not trying to overstate that you've, got tangible work experience in that place. But I would always say try to do some side gigs, side jobs, whether that's sitting on an NGO, advisory committee, or starting a actually, one of my clients, I helped her start a speaker series where she interviewed people in the issue areas she was interested in, and then posted those as articles and as YouTube videos, similar to what Natalie and I do, in the area that she wanted to learn more about. So there's lots of ways that you can get creative. Back to my point at the beginning was get creative about how you can start showing your relevance to those issues that you're passionate about.
Yeah, yeah, that's great advice. I've seen that work really well with people I've worked with too, and I think it kind of feeds into Adrian's question that I'm going to read off next about making networking less of a ask as opposed to like, can I interview you? Can I share your story? That makes a lot of sense. So with that, Adrian's question is, do you have any tips for networking for a more introverted job seeker? I can't help but feel like I'm bothering folks and want to ensure that they know how much I appreciate their time and energy.
Mm. Yeah, that's lovely. We know everybody's busy, right? And I think it is harder for people that are introverted, but even extroverts, there's something, I don't know, daunting about networking. I think we think of it as like we're cold calling, we're bothering people. Um, the people that don't want to be bothered aren't going to respond, right? And the people that are happy to help will. So don't take it personally. Either, if you don't hear back from people, it's just they're busy and don't have the time, or are bombarded with the same kinds of questions from other people. So I think that's one thing is just don't take any of this personally, to be honest. I know it's really hard to do that, but it's a little bit, this is just a little bit of a game in some ways as well. And we got to keep it light and keep plugging on, but not get too bogged down by ghosting and negative feedback. In terms of tricks to do, I definitely think starting something like a speaker series, you interview 5 people over 5 months, and then you write some sort of research paper on that, or you quote them on your LinkedIn, or you post their interviews. Things like that really help you to reach out to new people, and then they're getting featured and can use that content themselves as well. So you're helping them while you're also asking them for something. Um, you would then circle back to them maybe after that interview to ask them to then put you in touch with someone. So you're starting to build a relationship that's that's a win-win out of the gate rather than coming in and only asking. So I always say when you come to the networking table, always bring something to the table rather than only coming in with an ask. So that's a really important note on that one.
Yeah.
And then just remember, we're all in this together. We're all just people, and we're all on this mission together. So a lot of the people you're going to be reaching out to are like-minded and wanting to help and wanting to move this forward. So just keeping that, close to your heart, that in essence, people are good people and want to help. It's just sometimes people are busy. So
Yeah, certainly. That's great advice. And then our final question for the day from Peter is, I began focusing more of my time on targeting by reaching out to folks with relevant titles at relevant companies on LinkedIn, but I'm finding I'm not getting as much engagement as I'd like. Do you have any tips for being more effective with this kind of outreach?
yes, I have a whole step in my course on this one. This is a big one. So how do you network? Yeah, I mean, there's full books written on this, aren't there? But I would say again, it depends on what you're saying to them. So how are you writing your personal branding message to make you irresistible that they would want to talk to you? But most importantly, what kind of intel or information or what thing are you bringing to the table to that conversation that's going to make them want to speak to you? Because you have to also think each of those people you're reaching out to probably gets 10 of those a week, right? And so why are they going to want to talk to you more than someone else. And I have a whole, yeah, a whole step on just that. It's a big one, and it's easy to get wrong because we think, oh, we'll just send a quick email. Do you have time for a coffee chat? 10 minutes. I want to learn about your career. That doesn't work. We got to actually have something much more tangible that we're bringing to the conversation, and then we have to sell ourselves and why we're worthy of a conversation in that initial email without it being very long. So it's an art. But I wouldn't give up. I'd keep trying, but if it's not working, it means you need to change something. You need to get a new strategy or a new technique.
Yeah, certainly. And calling attention to what Andy just dropped in the chat about open door climate. If y'all are not using open door climate, highly recommend checking that
Good.
out because, as Shannon just said, leading with that, not leading with the ask, but leading with what you can deliver. Open door climate makes that really seamless because these people have said that they're open to talking to you. So, really does make that a little bit less of a barrier. So, thanks for sharing that, Andy.
Yeah. Really great.
Awesome.
Great
Well,
resource.
yeah, yeah. Shannon, any final thoughts from you before we wrap things up?
Yeah, yeah, you can do this. We need you out there. Don't give up. Keep going. Each one of you has something unique and special to offer. This is a game. Just keep playing it. Keep getting out there, and don't lose hope. And leverage each other. I think finding other people that are going through the process with you and at the same time can really help as well, so you don't feel alone. So
Yes.
those would be my last thoughts.
Super, super inspirational. Really appreciate that.
Yay.
Final reminder that I just dropped the two links to register for the session 2 and session 3 in the chat. You do need to register for those separately, so please do that. I will send out a follow-up email with all of these incredible resources that Shannon has shared, a link to her book, her guides, all of that. So if you learned something today, definitely take her up on exploring those further. And yeah, thank you again, Shannon. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to share all this information with us. And thank you everyone for all those incredible questions and being so engaged. It was a really fun hour. So we will see you
Thanks.
all in January.
Bye. Thank you.